So Fan Expo New Orleans is over and it doesn't owe me anything. Or maybe it does. It's time for another episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast.
It's time for the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. The podcast you look forward to for all of your news and reviews of the best comic books hitting stands. Whether it's DC,
Batman, Wonder Woman,
Marvel,
Spider-Man,
Image,
Spawn, Saga,
Boom,
Once and Future, Power Rangers,
or whatever book or publisher you follow,
we cover them all here.
this is the place for you.
That's right, it's for everyone.
This is the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast.
Let's get it.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. I am your host, Theo, back from Fan Expo New Orleans. It was a great time. Got another great episode lined up for you. First up, I'm going to give my recap of the weekend at Fan Expo New Orleans. Again, it's my fourth year covering the event. It's their fourth year in the city, and this year was just phenomenal considering the lineup that they had. And then I'm going to actually, after that, replay my broadcast of the Comic Bin Podcast live from Fan Expo New Orleans. I want to thank you all who did show up and support the show. But I'm going to go ahead and play that for you all, which highlighted my favorite of 2024. And then after that, I'm going to come back and I'm going to give my top 3 books of this past week. And I will give you a hint. They are all from DC Comics. And if you are following us on social media, you already know what my number 1 book is for the week. But let's go ahead and just jump into the show. So Fan Expo New Orleans held the weekend of January 10th through January 12th. It's their 4th year in the city since taking over from Wizard World. Had a wonderful time. I want to thank those guys for allowing me to cover it again for a 4th year. I can't wait to see what they have planned for their 5th anniversary on next year. But it was a wonderful weekend. Despite the rain and the extreme cold, it was just fun all around. They had a lot of people that showed up. And considering everything that was going on with the wildfires in California and the extreme cold weather that was going on the East Coast, we had a good representation of everyone that was scheduled to attend. As you know, there's always going to be a cancellation or two when it comes to conventions, but it could have been a whole lot worse considering what was going on in the country at that time with the wildfires and with the cold. I know I spoke to Jeremy Adams, who lives on the West Coast in California. He left there thinking his house was going to be fine, made it to New Orleans, and found out it wasn't quite that way. But he and his family are well. He had a wonderful time. Spoke with Stephanie Williams. She's from Chicago, so cold's not a thing for her. But she was almost trapped on the East Coast in Carolina, but she was able to make it in, and just had a good time talking to both of them, speaking with Mark Russell as well. It's always a good time to when I'm able to walk from table to table and speak to the comic creators that are there. But also this year, Fan Expo really showed out with this lineup. They billed it as the largest Back to the Future reunion ever, and it really was. They had a ton of folks from the movies that was there, from the major stars in Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd and Leah Thompson, to a bunch of the minor players who also had a role. And they even was able to bring Huey Lewis, whose band Huey Lewis and the News did the soundtrack to Back to the Future. So I had a wonderful time. You could tell those who was there for the Back to the Future experience truly had a fun time. I got to Fan Expo that Friday at about 4:30, and those folks were already lining up to get their seats into the Fan Expo Back to the Future experience that was lined up for that evening. And it was just a great time, despite the bad weather, despite everything that was going on in the rest of the country with all of the events. Again, I can't wait to see what they have planned for next year, which marks their fifth year in the city. But again, I want to thank those folks not only for allowing me to cover Fan Expo from a press standpoint, but also inviting me to bring the podcast to the creative stage. So, as you know, I was invited, bring the show. We were on the creative stage on that Sunday, last spot of the evening of the event, and didn't have as many as I was hoping, but I want to thank those that did show up and represent and support the show. To my surprise, I actually ended up on stage twice on that Sunday. There was a duel. There was a sketch duel that was planned prior to the podcast going on, and the moderator didn't show up. So I was asked to moderate that session with artists Scott Hanna and Derek Donovan, and it was just great sitting there between those two as they were duking it out on the drawing pages, just talking about their careers in the industry, especially someone like Scott Hanna, who has been doing this for decades and just doing it with ease. I mean, we were doing 10-minute sessions and he was knocking them out with full inking in that amount of time or less. And it was just a fun experience watching those guys from both sides just go at it and drawing the characters that they were drawing, whether it was the Joker, whether it was Spider-Man, whether it was the Hulk or Black Widow. That was just a fun experience, and it was a fun experience for those in attendance as well because we raffled off those drawings to those that was there. So I want to thank Libby over at Fan Expo for inviting me to bring the podcast there. I look forward to doing it again. And I want to thank those guys, Scott and Derek, for asking me to moderate their sketch duel as well. That was fun beyond imagine. Sitting there between two great creators as they were bringing pages to life while talking about their career in the comic book industry. But like I said, ended the event, ended the day, bringing the podcast to Fan Expo. We went live at 4 o'clock. And so I am going to play the audio of that. I did not record on video for obvious reasons. And after that, I'll come back and I'll close things out. And then we will take a look at my top 3 books of the past week. Enjoy. See you on the other side. So thank you, everyone. Welcome to the Comic Man Comic Book Podcast. I am your host, Theo. So we are here live at Fan Expo New Orleans. Last day, last time slot. Close it out with a bang. So we're going to have a few things that we're going to discuss in this episode. First, we're going to look at the best of 2024. Now, of course, these are my personal best. So please, if I say something that you don't agree with, don't kill me. Then we're going to, and we'll probably have time to do this, we're going to take a look at some of my hopes for 2025 in the year of comics and anime and manga and all those things that we love in pop culture. And then we're going to close out with rapid fire. And for those of you who don't know rapid fire is basically you get 2 options. You take however you want to pick. There are no right or wrong answers. And maybe you get some prizes. So I have a bunch of stuff to give away. So let's just go ahead and get things kicked off. And let's take a look at my best of 2024. I will go ahead and announce my favorite comic writer of the year. And that person is, well, not me, of course, but the guy next to me in the picture, Joshua Williamson. And that is a really well-deserved award for him, especially coming from me. So I have been very critical of Joshua Williamson in previous podcasts on some of his other titles, especially what he was doing at DC. He was doing a lot of stuff, and it seemed like with all of the titles he was working on, it was really causing his work to suffer because he was working on so much. But he's still working on a lot of stuff, but he's handling it so much better these days. So right now he's doing Superman. He's doing a couple of books over at the Energen universe with Skybound Image with GI Joe. He did Cobra Commander. He did the Duke series miniseries. He did Batman and Robin, but his handling of those titles and of those characters were so much better than what he was doing in previous years. And he just won me over with the work that he's done this year into 2024 on his titles. So that is my writer of the year, Joshua Williamson. So when it comes to comic book artists, I really struggled with this one because when it comes to art, and for those of you who were here in the previous session, when I was talking to Derek and with Scott, with the way art has evolved over the years, it's really easy to get caught up and tied to particular artists to where you can sometimes struggle to pick out your favorite. But for me, my artist of the year was Dan Mora. And what really secured him this win for me was this page right here, taken from Batman Superman World's Finest, number 26. But just the sight of Batman walking around wearing sunglasses is not something you will see every day. And yet he did it and he did a great job at doing it. And I absolutely loved the work that he did on this series. He's now working on Superman with Joshua Williamson, but I really became a fan of Dan Mora when he was working on Once and Future over at Boom Studios. But wonderful artist. He has a great ability of doing line work. I met him in Chicago once, and he actually did a sketch for me, and he put so much concentration in doing just a head sketch for me that you could see why he is as good as he is. But that is my favorite artist for 2024. If I had a number two, it would probably be Jorge Jimenez. Now, there are artists and there are cover artists. And, for a lot of times, Dan Mora does a lot of cover art as well. But for me this year, what made me not select Dan Mora this year was the announcement of the new Gotcha Man series from Mad Cave Studios. And the guy that's doing the main covers for that series, is my cover artist of the year, Inaki Miranda. And you just have to love that face that he's doing on that photo. But the work he does with the covers, and here's the cover for Gotcha Man number one. Looking at how he is paying true homage to the old Battle of the Planets Japanese anime from the 70s, you could really see the dedication he's putting into it. And when you look at the subsequent covers since then, and we're now going into issue 6 of Gotcha Man, you just see his pen work. A lot of times it reminds me almost of a cartoonish style of Alex Ross. He does a lot of the more realistic covers, but this one if there was a realistic art with cartoons, this would be it. And it is just wonderful work. I absolutely love the covers that he's doing for Gotcha Man. And it was enough, even though Gotcha Man has not been out a full year, it was enough for him to actually knock Dan Mora out of that. and give it on over to Inaki Miranda. So congrats to him for that. Now, my best comic book, and if you all follow the podcast, you would know I speak volumes about this series every every month that it's released. And my favorite book, my best book, is Boy Rivals from Skybound Image and Robert Kirkland with art from Lorenzo De Felici. Um, for the longest, this story was setting up this entire universe that Skybound is building with Hasbro toys that is focusing on the Transformers and G.I. Joe that are all supposed to be a part of this universe together. And if you are following the not only Void Rivals, but also G.I. Joe and the miniseries from G.I. Joe, but also Transformers, the linchpin was the Transformers being everywhere. And, they were showing up in G.I. Joe. Of course, they were in their own series. And we had a few Transformers show up in Boy Rivals as well. But the true question was, what was the characters of Boy Rivals, being Derek of Agoria and Celia of Zatonia? What were the role of that series? What made it so that when this universe was first introduced, it was the first book. It came out before G.I. Joe. It came out before Transformers. So what was it about that series that would make it so important? And we finally got that question answered mid last year in June with the issue that would turn out to be my favorite issue of the year, and that is Boy Rivals number 10. And what that issue revealed is that the citizens of Agoria and the citizens of Zatonia were more alike than they thought. And they had a real close connection, a closer connection than one would have thought. Now, the Zertonians and the Agorians are humanoids. They are human. They are humanoid individuals that only difference is a port that's in their head. That one is shaped more like a diamond, another is shaped almost like a upside down triangle. But what was revealed in issue 10, which really was just mind blowing for me, was that at their core, and this was revealed by Springer, one of the Transformers who was still a part of the series. But what Springer found was that the Agorians and the Zertonians, their DNA is Cybertronian in nature. Their heritage goes back to Cybertron. And that just brings everything full circle with how things focus on the Transformers being from Cybertron. And now we have this whole new world that is galaxies and galaxies away. However, deep down, they are from Cybertron according to their DNA makeup. And that just, it blew my mind. And when I spoke with Robert Kirkman about that, asking whether or not this was always planned to be that way or if it's something that just came out of the blue, you know, that was that was key to making Void Rivals the linchpin of this universe that Skybound created with the Anagon universe. But that is my favorite comic book issue of 2024, Void Rivals number 10. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about manga. And as I announce my best manga of the year, I will disclose that I am new to the genre. Folks are always bringing stuff to me as far as recommendations to read, including some of the publishers. But
because of how manga is set up in its style, with reading in the opposite direction of reading a regular comic book, it 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 for me it was difficult to do. Because it was difficult to do, it was quick for me to just put it to the side and not worry about it, because at some point I'm like, okay, I can't do this. But eventually I was handed a manga that really caused me to stick with it. And so my favorite manga is Batman Justice Buster, which is a partnership from DC Comics and Kodansha, which is a manga publisher. And the reason why, compared to manga such as One Piece or Chainsaw Man or other types of manga, why would I pick something as common as Batman to be my favorite manga? Is that being a Batman fan, it commits me to wanting to get through it. I'm not going to easily put that issue down now, because it's a character that I truly care about. And you could see as the manga it holds true to the manga style of being in black and white, but it also holds true to a lot of the history of Batman as well. So we see Wayne Industries, we see Batman, although his costume is more of a Batwing of DC Comics than it is a Batman, but it holds true to a lot of what makes Batman Batman. However, the weirdest part is the fact that Robin isn't a person. Robin is AI in this world. And so, but we still see Bruce Wayne, we see Alfred. So all of those things about Batman that you know and love, it's there. And so it causes me to keep interest and not to put the book down. And even without knowing, or at least not recognizing the face, you can see who the big bad is just by reading the words "Don't make me laugh" to know that the big bad is going to be the Joker. So again, I'm new to manga, still getting used to it. I'm reading other stuff that's been recommended to me, like Moriarty, Patriot, and just Kaiju comic series or manga series. But if there's one thing that will keep me interested in doing manga, it's this series, and that is my favorite anime of the year, Batman Justice Buster. I am sad that it is coming to an end this year. It's in its final arc right now. And then moving on over to my last category, favorite anime. And like manga, it is a genre that is new to me. Now, growing up in the 80s, we had cartoons such as Speed Racer, and we had Battle of the Planets, which is Gotcha Man. But we just knew them as cartoons. We didn't know that they were rooted in Japanese animation, which is what we know as anime today. Uh, so I had a love for it. I just didn't know what it is. And anime back then is a lot different than anime today. But my favorite anime for 2024, and it's one that actually premiered in 2024, is Don Da Don. And the simplest way to put it is, this is the most batshit crazy thing that I have ever seen recently, but I absolutely love it. There is a whole bunch of crazy going on. And it's rooted in two high school students who one is more or less a witch or sorceress. The other had a curse put on them to make him into a witch or into this demon-like figure. And the entity that can heal him is actually trapped in the form of that cat toy that you see at the top of the picture. But they are now dealing with all of these things, aliens and monsters that have a lot of connection, but it is just it is so crazy. It is not something that I would I would advise you let your kids watch or your grandkids watch. It is more adult oriented, but it is it is totally crazy. I absolutely love it for what it is. Season two is going to be coming out in July. The trailer from Crunchyroll is already out there if you haven't seen it already. But that is my favorite anime series or movie for 2024, which is Don the Don. Uh, so it's actually not only on Crunchyroll, but it's also on Netflix as well, if you want to take a look at it. So before closing out, I would like to just give some hopes as far as what I would like to see as we move forward in 2025. You know, as 2024 came to an end, especially with DC Comics, they came out with this All In initiative, which I was really hesitant about. With them kind of branching off, and what they in turn did was create their own version of the Marvel Ultimate Universe, and I was really hesitant about that, especially considering some of the individuals who was behind it. Now, again, Joshua Williams is behind it, and again, he's one of my favorite writers and my writer of the year. But Scott Snyder is also involved, and if you all follow me, you know that Scott Snyder and I are not the best of friends. I have had some personal conversations with him about some of the stuff that he has written, and I am not afraid to eat my crow with regards to how things have begun with uh, the All In initiative, especially what's happening in the split off, which is the Absolute Universe. And right now we have Absolute Batman, Absolute Superman, and Absolute Wonder Woman. All three of them are absolutely wonderful series. And I will again eat my crow and say that what Scott Snyder is doing on Absolute Batman has just been great. Um, Absolute Superman is probably the best of the three right now from Jason Aaron, but all three of them are really good. And if you're not following the Absolute Universe, you're missing out on some good stuff. And at some point, there's gonna be a meeting of the minds when the Absolute Universe and the regular continuity of the DC universe come head to head. And then on the other side of things, with the big two, with Marvel, they of course have the Ultimate Universe going on. It started out with a bang. We are still waiting for the maker to come back, but I am excited, especially with regards to Ultimate Spider-Man. That's the best of the series right now. But yeah, with regards to the big two, I am pleasantly surprised with how 2024 has ended and how 2025 has kicked off. So that's it for those two. Now with the smaller independent publishers, I have been very high on the folks over at Mad Cave Studios. Of course, they're doing Gotcha Man with Cullen Bunn, and I actually interviewed him a couple of months ago. If you haven't heard that episode yet, but it's they are doing what a couple of other publishers are doing, and they are creating partnerships with a lot of toy makers, other comic book publishers, or other entertainment industry execs. So, for example, Mad Cave is also doing Flash Gordon. They're also doing Defenders of the Earth, and having the Phantom and those characters all involved. And we see other of the smaller independent publishers like Dynamite. They're doing Johnny Quest and Space Ghost. Again, a lot of those 70s, 80s cartoons that we grew up with are now making a comeback on the pages of comic books. And so a lot of these comic book publishers, these indie publishers, are doing a great job of really going out there and taking those older comics or those older animation series and putting them on pages in a way that today's readers can appreciate and would want to pick up. And so I hope to continue to see them do that. IDW has been killing it with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and with several Star Trek series. So the indies are keeping their names out front as well. It's not just about DC and Marvel. It hasn't been that way for a long time, even after the advent of Image. So I have a lot of hope for the comic book industry going into 2025, and then anime and manga, that's just a whole different train of its own, and it's going to continue to grasp a hold of our younger generation, the millennials and younger, and just really pull them in. And we know how good and how influential they are when we see some of the big two, such as DC doing Justice Buster, grab a hold to realize that, hey, this is something that we need to take grasp of. DC just did a few years ago. They did a Batman Ninja, which was more in the anime style. They have the Batman versus the Justice League anime that's going to be coming out, and I believe that's mid this year. So anime and manga aren't going anywhere, and I would expect that they will continue to have their fan base just like the normal comic book industry will as well.
So again, I want to thank the folks at Fan Expo for allowing me to bring the podcast to the creative stage at Fan Expo New Orleans. I had a wonderful time, not only doing the podcast, but also moderating the sketch do before that. I hope to be able to do it again, and hopefully, if not at another show, especially at Fan Expo when it comes back to New Orleans in January of 2026. But with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into my top 3 books for this past week. In the number 3 spot, we have Green Lantern Fracture Spectrum #1, written by Jeremy Adams with art from V. Ken Marion. It's all really a setup for the upcoming Green Lantern Corps series that will be coming back next month from Jeremy Adams, but it also follows the Civil Corps one shot that was out a month or so ago, and Jeremy Adams' long run on Green Lantern itself, and it all stems from everything with Theros and the United Planets, and the fact that all of the lanterns of the emotional spectrum are without power batteries, with the exception of the Green Lantern Corps. And there are new Guardians, there are new villains that they are dealing with, and it's just a great setup for what's to come. So the big bad right now is Sorrow, who is someone from Hal and Carol's past. He's Carol's ex-fiance, and so he has a pretty big grudge with Hal right now. But what what Sorrow is doing, and that's his emotion. His real name is Nathan. But what Sorrow is looking to do is he's stolen the Book of War, and he stole it from Guy Gardner. How he got it, it's in the book. Read it. I don't want to spoil it. But he wants to use it to build his own lantern battery. And it's supposed to be a super one. But it gives the Corps their mission now. This is what the mission is going to be, to stop Sorrow from building this big power battery that's supposed to really cause more damage to the universe, while the Green Lantern Corps is not only doing their typical police duties, but they are also looking out for the other lanterns of the spectrums that don't have their own batteries. So we know that Kilowog, he has some issues going on. He was under a different emotion for a while. We know Jessica for a while was a Yellow Lantern. She's now the leader of the Corps, leading the group. So it's just a whole lot that is going on with the other lanterns being without their power batteries. So we will see how Jeremy Adams bring all of that into play. I'm excited for Green Lantern Corps once it comes out next month in February. I hope to have Jeremy Adams back on the show so that we can talk about it as we get closer to that release date. But really a good episode, good issue to lead us into the Green Lantern Corps, as well as Hal's continuing adventures in his own book. But I ended up getting the variant cover from Steven Segovia. I absolutely love that picture of just all of the lanterns from Joe to Guy. You know, Guy is my favorite lantern, so just having him on the cover was enough for me to want to pick it up. But excited for Green Lantern Corps, excited for continuing Green Lantern itself and everything that Jeremy Adams is doing, not only within the world of the GL Corps, but also as it fits into everything that's going on into DC's All In initiative. Again, truly enjoyed it. It was good enough that it is my number 3 book for the week. And again, that is Green Lantern, Fractured Spectrum, number 1 from Jeremy Adams and V. Ken Marion. Okay, in the number 2 spot, Black Lightning number 3, written by Brandon Thomas, art by Fico Ocio. But I also want to give kudos on the colors from Ulysses Ariolo. Absolutely loved this issue, you know, especially the end. It really is setting up a hell of a story for the next issue that I just cannot wait to see. But it begins with this big old battle at Steelworks, and Natasha, aka Steel, and Jennifer, aka Lightning, are all fighting this. Well, they're both fighting this group of assailants who are trying to break into Steelworks to steal something. And on the upper floors, Lynn Stewart, you know, Jefferson's ex-wife, as well as Anissa and Isaac, who is from the series, if I can remember correctly, from the TV series, if I can remember correctly. They're all running and they get to this armory or this lab that just houses a bunch of stuff that's not only from Steelworks, but also from Star Labs and from Cadmus that these folks are trying to break in and steal. And Anissa is hampered. You know, if you can remember from last issue, we learned that she not only had her regular powers, but she also had powers that weren't hers. They were absorbed from someone else. And so she's having trouble dealing with it. And so she's wearing a power damper on her ankle to keep her powers from manifesting. And so they're all there trying to secure things until Lynn realizes that, you know, the things that they put into play aren't going to work and someone is actually getting ready to break through. And so she takes the chance on her daughter. She takes that power dampener off, and it allows Anissa's powers to manifest, not just her regular powers, but the new powers that she has gotten through the course of absolute power. And she just blows through everything. And ironically, the lead of the series, Black Lightning, he doesn't really show up until near the end when Jen is in some trouble with one of the fights that she's having outside of Steelworks. But he comes in just in time, saves everyone. But by the time the fighting is over, we see that Anissa is starting to lose control. She was able to protect everyone upstairs. She was able to get her mom and her friend out of the building. But now the power that she has within her is starting to lose control. She's unable to maintain it. And Jefferson, being the good dad that he is trying to calm his daughter down, and trying to get her to use just regular techniques to get a control of herself. But there's someone speaking to him in his ear, and I'm going to imagine it was either Mr. Terrific or it was Batman, one of the two. But before Jefferson is able to really get Anissa to calm down and get herself back into control, she's teleported away. She's teleported back to the watchtower, into one of them containment units that they have set up on the watchtower for those people that they've been bringing that have powers that aren't there. And this pisses Jefferson off seriously, to the point where he goes to the watchtower, he blows past Mr. Terrific saying, "Hey, I got this," and he confronts the Trinity. And what I love about this from Brandon Thomas is he makes Jefferson appears big enough within this universe of DC that he can approach and he can confront the members of the Trinity. He can confront Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman without a fear in the world with regards to seeing his daughter and doing the things that a parent would want to do. And he uses that, in many ways to try to talk sense into all three of them, considering that all three are now parents themselves. Now that Diana has Trinity, but it boils down to they won't allow him to see her. They need to get her powers under control and to get them dampened again. And they want to do it their way, not his way, as not only a superhero who's kind of in charge of this project of identifying and bringing these new metas that have powers that aren't theirs, or superheroes that have powers that may belong to someone else, aka Aquaman. But that's Jefferson's thing as the teacher of the group. But he is to identify and help these metas, or these civilians who have meta powers, get control of those new abilities until they're able to get them back where they belong. But now here it is. The Trinity is not allowing him to do that with his own daughter. And, leave it to Batman to be the blunt, curt bastard that he is when asked why they won't allow him to see Anissa. He point blank tells him, because not only is she dangerous, but so are you. And that final page is just awesome, of Jefferson fist clench, he just ready to just blow at Superman, and ready to throw a wild punch at him. But it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in issue 4 when it comes out, as to how he deals with, the duality of not only being a mentor, but also being a father to someone who has powers that are out of control. But it's going to be real interesting to see how Jefferson deals with the duality of not only being a teacher and a mentor, but also being a parent to a meta whose powers are out of control and not her own. And I'm excited to see where that goes next in issue 4. Now, let me just say, the art in this issue and the colors in this issue were just perfect. The duo of Fico Ocio and Ulysses Aurelia is just, it was just perfect. There was nothing about that. If you read my review of the issue that's up on the website, you'll see that I gave the art pretty much a perfect score, especially the colors. The colors throughout the issue were just beautiful. It really allowed everything that Vico put on the page to come to light, which is what a colorist is supposed to do. And that was just done perfectly. I can't say enough about how much I not only enjoyed the art, but how much I loved the art. But it was really good, and I can't wait to see what comes next with Black Lightning. I'm hoping I can sit down one day to talk to the creative team about their work and what they're doing on the series. But again, that is my number two book for the week. Black Lightning number three from Brandon Thomas and Fico Ocio over at DC Comics. And so that leads us to my number one book for the week. And again, if you following the podcast on social media, you already know that my number one book is Milestone Universe, The Shadow Cabinet number three, written by Joseph Ilyich, with art from a trio of great artists. Of course, we have the legendary Dennis Cowan, we have Darryl Banks, and we have Adigan Ilhan. But I also want to give kudos to the inks from Prentice Rollins and the colors from Chris Sotomayor. So, for me to talk about why this book was so important for me and why it became my top book of the week, I have to go all the way back to Milestone Returns, when we first got hints of all of the characters of the Milestone universe coming back. And we didn't get much of that in season one once Milestone returned with Static or with the Blood Syndicate. Things were really kind of kept apart. Hardware had his series. I mean, things really weren't gelling. And then we start to see a melding of things once season two occurred. We seen some crossover between Static and the Blood Syndicate. We see all these things happening. And as time went on and more stuff came out, we saw where, the universe really started coming together. The universe that once known as the Dakotaverse, now Planet M, really started to gel. And we see in issue three now where there were just all of these characters that have been a part of the Milestone universe have now made their appearance. Now, of course, the Shadow Cabinet, that has always been led by Dharma, has been coming together. But, in this issue, we also get the reveal of Technique, and we see that she may be on the good side this time. We know for much of her history, she's been an adversary of Hardware. But now we see that Curtis is kind of putting things in play so that she could actually join the team. The whole issue was just a whole bunch of just puzzle pieces being moved around and put into place, not only by Dharma, but also by Hardware, by Curtis. Even though he is captured by Angela Alva, who, we get a good backstory into that family and the fact that the Alva family has for generations been a mixed family, and of course, if you can clearly see that Angela is of black skin, and so we get a backstory of that family, and we see in the end that through her musings and of the things she's looking to do, we see the return of her brother. we see Alva, the head of Alva Technologies, make his return in some type of cosmic form. She brought him back to life. We thought he was long dead after Hardware, but we see that Big Brother turned on her, and so it's just a great story. And we see Alva go after Icon. He hasn't been seen in a while off in space, and we see that he finds Icon, and he goes to take him out and fight him. Again, we see Curtis putting his own pieces into play. We see the return of Duo from that miniseries a few years ago. They make their return, as Hardware leads. Uh, we see them make their return as Hardware leads Rocket away to meet them at this new safe house that he had set up after the original one that they were hiding in was destroyed by Curtis. But we just see so many things in play, and we see all these puzzle pieces being moved around, not just by Dharma, but also by Curtis. It's just a great story of back and forth of two important characters within the Milestone universe playing chess. And it makes you wonder if they're playing chess with each other. It makes you wonder whether or not Hardware knows a little bit more about the Shadow Cabinet's existence. And we will definitely see that in the next issue, which is the last, I'm sad to say. And I said it on social media, and I'm gonna say it here right now. Milestone needs a few ongoing series. There's no reason why Static shouldn't have his own series, especially considering where he is right now. And we see it in this issue where he doesn't want to leave his family. He's looking at just protecting them. He's not worried as much about what's going on in Dakota as long as it stays away from his door. But we see his mom, who's dying, basically say, hey, the world needs you, and I am in a better place knowing that you are out there doing what you've been gifted to do. And so we will probably see the return of Static next issue as well. But we just see all of these pieces of the puzzle just coming into place, both for Hardware and for Dharma, and it's going to lead to a fun finale when issue 4 comes out next month. I am I'm happy. I'm sad that this particular miniseries is coming to an end. We already know that another one is coming out in the next few months with the Power Company. So it's good to see that Milestone continue to be on the pages of comic books. I just personally I personally wish that we could see more of Milestone in an ongoing basis, mainly with an ongoing series. There are enough characters in play within this universe that at least one or two of them can have an ongoing series of their own that can bring other characters from the universe within it. And I hope that happens one day, because Milestone does have a great legacy with this characters, particularly with Static. There's no reason why Static can't be in an ongoing series of his own, and I hope to see it one day. But just been a great series from Joseph Ilyich. I am happy that usually I complain when there are multiple artists on an issue, but the way that Dennis Cowan and Daryl Banks and Adigan Ilhan played their part in this issue, each taking particular periods or particular scenes. We know that Dennis Cowan did most of the backstory of the Alva family. It was just, he did the cover also, but it was just a great play on everything that's been going on from start to finish with this miniseries. And the fact that Prentice Rollins and Chris Sotomayor was able to ink and color this series themselves. I'm not certain if Dennis Cowan or Darryl Banks did any inking themselves. I know Adigan Ilyan inked his own pages, but everything was just beautifully done. Uh, Reviews up on the website for this as well. Gave it high scores again. It was high enough to make it my book of the week. Absolutely loved it. Hate that it's coming to an end next month with the final issue, issue number 4. But I'm happy that Milestone is getting some exposure, and hope that they continue to get some exposure far beyond what we get in the pages of Power Company once that comes out in a few months as well. But that is my book of the week. Milestone Universe, The Shadow Cabinet number 3 from Joseph Ilyich, Dennis Cowan, Darryl Banks, and Adigan Ilhan over at DC Comics. All right, so there you have it, my top 3 books for this past week. If I had a top 5, the first that would have been in the 4th spot would have been Storm number 4 over at Marvel Comics from Mayowa Ayodele and Lucas Wernick. Aurora goes to Liberia to have a sit down with Dr. Doom, aka the new Sorcerer Supreme. And if you can remember from the previous issue, she as a payment for her not dying and being given her life back, she can't use her mutant abilities for 7 days. And so we see how all of that plays out, because there was definitely a prophecy that she was going to die. And so we're going to see how that, well, we see how that plays out in issue number 4. I really enjoyed it. Really been enjoying the entire series with Storm. She's always been one of my favorite X-Men, in addition to Havoc. But that's issue 4. It would have been in my number 4 spot, and then in my number 5 spot would have been Space Ghost number 9 from David Pepose and Jonathan Lau. It actually ended up being the last part of the arc involving Metalis. And if there was one thing that I was a little disappointed with, is the fact that it did end so quickly. I know we are in the final stretch of the series, but I was hoping to get at least 3 issues between Space Ghost and Metalis. But we see a pretty damn good way of bringing that mini arc to an end, as Space Ghost meets Metalis in the center of the ring one final time, after we see what Metalis did to Space Ghost in issue 8, which, if you can remember from my interview with David Pepose, was kind of his Bane Batman moment, where Metalis kind of handed Space Ghost his ass. But we see Space Ghost make a comeback. And if you stick around to the end of the issue, you will see what is coming in issue number 10, which is, I'm expecting to be a little bit funny as we get into the final issues of the series over there at Dynamite. I'm really hoping that we get some more issues, but of course that's all up to Dynamite. But Dynamite, if you're paying attention, make it happen. But those are my 2 honorable mentions. As if I had a top 5, those 2 books would have been there. And it was a really good week of comics, and it's gonna be an even better week next week. So let's go ahead and talk about that. So that's going to do it for this episode of the Comic Book Podcast. Again, I want to thank the folks at Fan Expo for allowing me to perform and bring the podcast to the creative stage there, and hope to do it again next time. Wow, next time. There are a bunch of books that I'm going to be reading for next episode, just a great amount, and ironically, they're all, not all, but most of them are from DC Comics. And a year ago, I would not have been that way. There were probably far less DC books that I was reading than what I am now. But since the end of Absolute Power and the beginning of All In, I have really been really been attracted to a bunch of the titles. They've been doing a hell of a job with what they're doing with All In thus far, and I hope to see them continue. But next week, first up, on the side with Marvel, Ultimate Spider-Man number 13 from Jonathan Hickman and Marco Cicchetto will be out. Remember, Harry and Peter were captured in the last issue. We now see that they are being hunted by Craven the Hunter. So we'll see how that plays out. Then we have a new series from Marvel, X-Men, Xavier's Secret number 1 from writer Alex Paknadel with art from Diogenes Neves. We will see what that's all about. I haven't read the preview just yet that Marvel sent out, but I plan on doing so. But I plan on reading the entire issue for next week as well. Hopefully it makes my top 3 or top 5. Then moving on over to DC Comics, Absolute Wonder Woman number 4 from Kelly Thompson and Hayden Sherman. We continue that story. We then also get Superman number 22 from Joshua Williamson, my writer of the year, as well as my artist of the year, Dan Mora. We will see what's going on as Superman continues this battle with Doomsday. And then Justice League Unlimited number 3 from writer Mark Waid with art from Dan Mora. There's that Dan Mora guy again, favorite artist. And then we go then to Wonder Woman number 17 from Tom King with art from Daniel Sampier. I have been following this. I am a little annoyed that it's still a Sovereign story. I was really hoping that it would come to an end soon, but I ultimately think that what we're getting now with this story from Tom King is that it will ultimately lead into this series that they were hinting at with Elizabeth, aka Trinity, because the Sovereign is constantly telling the story of Diana and her revenge tour in a quote unquote letter to Lizzie. So that's where I think it's going. But I've been following it. It's been great. I actually enjoyed how Tom King has handled Diana in this series. Then Black Canary, Best of the Best number 3 from Tom King with art from Ryan Sook. I've been enjoying the art from Ryan Sook on this series, and again, I'm expecting a swerve at some point. We already got a mini one with seeing that Dinah is being bribed per se by Vandal Savage to take a fall in a particular round. But we will see how that all plays out. I am still unconvinced of this notion that Dinah or anyone for that matter, well, very few for that matter, have the ability to take down Lady Shiva. But we will see how the series goes. Issue 3 is out on shelves this coming Wednesday. Then we're going to go to Power Girl number 17 from Leah Williams with art from David Baldion. We now see we get a new start for Paige, and she then bought this new place for her and for her girls to hang out at, and we get a new suit for her again. We'll see how that all plays out with her and Natasha and Omen, and we'll see. I've been enjoying it as of late. I wasn't always into the series, but it's kind of caught on as of late. But I'll continue reading it until I get turned off again. But right now, I've been enjoying it from Leah Williams. Then moving on over Skybound Image, Boy Rivals number 16 from writer Robert Kirkman with art from Lorenzo De Felici. And we see, the continuation of Celia trying to find Zerda. And we also try to figure out what's going on with Derek as he learns more and more about his dad and Zeliak's conspiracy to hide the truth from their people. So we'll see how that all plays out. And then over at Boom Studios, Power Rangers Prime #3. So I've been reading this, and I've been enjoying it. It just hasn't been great enough to break into the top three or the top five for any of the honorable mentions. But I've been enjoying the series thus far from Melissa Flores with art from Michael YG. So we'll see how issue 3 plays out for this new Boom series with the Power Rangers. Then moving on over to Dynamite, we have the Terminator #4, and we know that's kind of that anthology type series, with one story being written by Declan Shelby, the other stories being written by Sal Crivelli. So we'll see how that plays out as the Terminators look to take out their foes, their assignments. Then moving on over to Dark Horse. The Magic Order, Volume 5, #4, from Mark Millar with art from Matteo Buffagni. We will see how everything plays out in this final issue, and well, at least this final volume of the series that's supposed to be a TV show one day on Netflix. But remember, Cordelia still prophesies to die. So we'll see whether or not that actually happens by the time the final issue comes out. But issue #4 comes out on this Wednesday. And then finally, over at Mad Cave Studios, Gotcha Man, written by Cullen Bunn with art from Chris Batista. In this next issue is kind of a quiet issue. I've already read it. I've already started on my review of it. But we're gonna see the team take a break of sorts. And so I'm not gonna say anything more and spoil it. But I've already read that and typing up my review for it. Again, just like I mentioned in the podcast over at Fan Expo, I've loved what they've been doing with Gotcha Man. Chris Anaki is just been doing some stunning work with the covers, and I hope to see more of that. You know, he's been doing some great work. But that's what I'm reading this week. We will see which books will crack the top 5 and which will be my top 3 for the week. So stick around and let's see how it all plays out. That is going to do it for this episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. I'd like to thank you all for your continued support of the program. The Comic Bin Podcast, as well as the Comic Book Spot, are a part of the Comic Book Source family of sites and media. You can follow the podcast on Twitter X at comic_bin, or my personal account at BatmanFan_4Life. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. We're all over social media. You can also follow our sister site over at thebatmanuniverse.net for all of your news and reviews in the world of Batman. Tune in next time as we give you more in the world of comic books. Again, we truly appreciate your support. But until we meet again next time, keep reading those comics.